Hello, chemistry class. I thought I would go over your lab report from today's experiment. So here we are, experiment 7.2, how wet is copper sulfate, the date, and our data. And this data we had on the board, the mass of the beaker and the rod, and I'm just using an example here to show you the math. The mass of the beaker, the rod, and the hydrated sulfur, copper sulfate, and then the mass of the beaker and the rod and the anhydrous copper sulfate. And then we have those measurements. Then we needed to get the mass of the anhydrous copper sulfate by taking the amount of anhydrous copper sulfate and subtracting the container. So it gave us 3.4 grams. You're going to have a different number than me, okay? Then it wanted us to get the mass of a single molecule. So I took the formula just like you do in order to get a mole, and I went to the periodic table and I got the atomic mass for all the elements in our molecule. There are 4 elements of oxygen, so it has to be 4 times the atomic mass. And you add all those up together and you end up with 159.61. And this will be the same on yours, equals 1 mole of copper sulfate. So then we want the moles of the copper sulfate in this reaction. So we take our 3.4 grams over 1 and we multiply it by the 1 mole, okay, which is 1 over the 159.61 that we just got. We cancel the grams out and we end up with 0.021 moles. So in our experiment, that's how many moles of copper sulfate we have. Then they wanted us to find out the mass of the evaporated water. So you take the weight of the mass of the hydrated copper sulfate, and you subtract the mass of the anhydrous copper sulfate to give you the amount of water, which was 1.7 grams with my calculations here. Then they wanted us to have the mass of a single molecule of water, and we've done this in a couple of the CC questions before, where hydrogen, there's 2 hydrogens in an H2O at 1.01 and oxygen at 16, comes together, it's 18.02 grams, equals 1 mole of water, and you will have that same thing, okay? Then we want the moles of water in this experiment. So we take the 1.7 grams and we multiply it by 1 mole of water. And now we know that we have 0.094 moles of water in this experiment. Okay, so we have almost all our calculations done. Then they asked for the ratio of the moles of water to the moles of the copper sulfate. So we took our moles of water amount and we divided it by our moles of copper sulfate amount, and it gives us 4.5. It rounds up because it's a molecule, so whole number rounds to 5, and that's the end of our calculations. The end of our data is we measured approximately 5 grams of hydrated copper sulfate and dehydrated it to determine how much water 1 mole of copper sulfate holds. And here's your summary. By measuring the mass of a compound, one can count the molecules or the moles in the sample. And we determined that 1 molecule of copper sulfate holds 5 molecules of water. Oh, I see I didn't have that all the way over. I hope that's helpful. Please finish writing that up and I'll take a look at that on Thursday. Have a great evening.